Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm joined by another new friend we just met. Welcome to the podcast, Lillian Rafson.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I've been kind of dragging my feet on responding to people who submitted the form because, as you probably saw on the form, and if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, last year we were really focused on doing these small group conversations, and there were some issues with the scheduling tool and all of this. And so I planned to do another round of those, but I wanted a new scheduling tool and I couldn't really find one that worked. So I was building my own and this whole thing. And so I was just delaying, I was just collecting people's forms that I knew I wanted to talk to. And I hadn't even responded. It's not even like I told you, yes, I want to talk to you. I just I held on to these forms, was just collecting them. Anyways, obviously, as you've noticed, I've been doing some one-to-one conversations. It's just easier to schedule, and I just wanted to move forward and not be delayed. I do plan to go back to the small group conversations, but in the meantime, there's some one-on-one conversations that have just been really good. And this year, as you know, if you've been listening to the show, I have been the only word for it, and I've said this on the podcast before, excavating. I've been excavating a lot of things and redefining success and figuring out what's actually important to me and what am I even doing here and what do we want to do. And I've said all along that I think entrepreneurship shines a floodlight on all our shit, like all the stuff, right? And I really feel like that's what this year has been for me, is it's just bringing up all of the things. So needless to say, when I was going back and actually reviewing these forms from people and seeing what other people had said they wanted to talk about, etc., Lillian shared her story in her form, and or at least a small part of your story, of a much bigger story, I'm sure, but a small part of your story and your entrepreneurship journey. And it fits so freaking well into everything that I've been experiencing and we've been talking about, even though it's obviously your own unique version of it, that I was like, yeah, we need to talk about it. And specifically what you said on that form is that you want to talk about scaling business with the context of what happens when external measurements of success or success metrics are no longer aligned with what's going on with you internally, and just kind of how to navigate that and balance that. So that's opening remarks, I guess, for what are we even doing here? And I'm going to let you explain, what does that mean to you? Why is that important?
Yeah, that's great context. And I love the word excavating because I feel like with so much in business, you are going all the time. You are putting out fires, working on projects, helping manage your employees, that there's so little time to really stop and reflect on how you're doing and how you're feeling. And so I recently have been feeling like entrepreneurship is at once like a crash course MBA all the time, and really exposes what you need to go to therapy for. At least that's been my experience. So
Yeah.
I love that word, excavation. I think it's so important, and I'm glad you're taking the time to really dig in and explore that more. And just to give a little bit more context about why I reached out and what my company is that led me there. I started my business, Pack Up and Go, 10 years ago when I was 23. We are a travel agency, but our niche is that we plan surprise vacations. So our travelers don't discover where they're going until the day they depart. And it's a very fun business, and I feel very lucky that I get to work in a really fun industry that brings people joy. That's like my dream scenario. I know I am not equipped to cure cancer, and I love what I do. And I think about how grateful I am for that all the time. And so I started the company when I was 23. I built it on Squarespace. We're a bootstrap business. And over the years, it grew really steadily. And then during the pandemic, it actually kind of exploded, which is not it's pretty counterintuitive when you think about the travel industry during the pandemic. And of course, there were a few slow months, but all of our trips are within the US. We offer road trips, we offer outdoors trips. And so when people were really unable to travel and take trips overseas, we provided a very safe and easy alternative. And so coming out of the pandemic, the business boomed. And I have always been a people pleaser. I know this about myself. I thrive on positive reinforcement. Nothing in this world brings me more joy than when a traveler gives us like a perfect review for their trip. I will be on a high from that all day. And so seeing all of this rapid growth was really exciting to me. And my whole team that I was building was really excited about rapid growth. And I was excited seeing my team so excited. And then we started winning a lot of awards for rapid growth. And I just found myself sort of on this hamster wheel of excitement and positive reinforcement and everyone asking what's next and how are we going to grow. And once you have a team, our team was up to 30 people full time. You run into all of these other challenges around like HR and people's computers not working and company culture and all of these new challenges. And some of them were really exciting. And all of a sudden, I remember waking up one day and looking around and being like, what's going on? Like, how did I get here? And because there was so much to do all the time, I didn't have time for that opportunity to really get introspective and look around and see if I liked it or not. It was just going, going, going all the time. People were telling me I was doing the right thing and on the right track and building more tech and all of this stuff. And it wasn't until I remember this so vividly because there was one week where I was told that Pack Up and Go was winning an award through the Pittsburgh Business Times, where the business is based. And it was called the Fast 50 Awards. And it was an award that was being given to the 50 businesses in the region that were growing the fastest. And I was so tired and I didn't want to go to this event. And I didn't even know if I was business number 50. Like I had no context for it. And I went and Pack Up and Go turned out to be the number two fastest growing business in the Pittsburgh region in 2023. And I remember sitting at this dinner, at this like award ceremony dinner, like, what? And everyone's so excited about our growth and expecting the same level of growth the next year. And I realized I didn't I didn't feel that accomplished. It felt like this huge award that was meant for somebody else. And right around this time, the travel industry was slowing down. This was now, we're into 2023. Everyone had spent their pandemic savings. The economy was starting to shift, and people were pulling back from travel. And I had just won this huge award that was celebrating our growth. And then all of a sudden, things started to slow down. And I panicked and we were having a really hard time meeting payroll. And it just felt like it all right after that award, everything sort of unfurled. And it was really scary. It was a really, really scary time. And it forced me to really excavate for myself and say, like, how did I get here? And what do I actually want? And where do I go from here? It was a crazy moment.
Yeah. I mean, wild, wild context and a tremendously impressive and interesting story because I think there's people, somebody is listening to this who's like, okay, yeah, it got hard, but
Mhm.
you lived something that other people are dreaming about. But that's not how it felt when you were living it. And I think that's really, really interesting. Now, listen, I've said this on the podcast before. I'm going to say it again. I'm not like a huge fan of the like cozy business movement. It's not really like my thing. I call this big brave business, not cozy brave business, right? Like I want to have a big impact. I want to make killer money, but killer money is relative. And I think that's something that for me personally, like I really had to learn is that what I'm making now would have felt like killer money 10 years ago. And honestly, any version of my 9 to 5 life, like this is amazing money and an amazing lifestyle already. And I don't plan to stop here, but like once you start to do the calculations, especially when other people are taking notice, like externally, because one of the things I started thinking right as you started talking, we just met right on Zoom, but as you started talking and you shared a little bit of context for your age, I was thinking like, wow, even the way you speak and present yourself, like you are so impressive. And I'm sure you've been hearing that for the past 10 years, especially starting so young. Like I'm sure you've heard it countless times. And I say this number one because I mean it and I genuinely think that you're phenomenally impressive for so many reasons. But number two, I also get that a lot. And I think the person listening to this gets it too, right? If you've been in business, if you make it through, honestly, even the first year, but if you make it through a couple of years and you're on an upward trajectory, then especially if you started young, and young is relative. I would say if you started under 50, there are people who are going to look at you and say, "Oh, that's really impressive." Like most people aren't doing what you're doing. Now, obviously, then you add in how rapidly you were growing, especially compared to other businesses in your area. And you were accomplishing a lot in that time, more than even just staying in business for 3 years, right? It was like, oh no, we're like rapidly growing. All of this to say, I want to, there's some things that you mentioned that I really want to like zoom in on. And one thing is you were getting this award and you didn't feel accomplished. So what did you feel and what did you feel like you were supposed to be feeling?
Yeah, okay. So the way that this dinner worked, and I haven't thought that much about this event in a long time. So this is going to bring back a lot of anxiety for me. But the way that this dinner worked was we were invited. So we were told that we made this list and we were seated at different tables and the MC was up and they started at number 50, the 50th fastest growing, and they showed some of your stats. What was your top line revenue the year before versus this year, and what was the percentage growth? And as we were going, these are some big businesses in Pittsburgh. And the companies are going and we're getting down to the 30s and then the 20s. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, they didn't mean to invite me. I I wasn't supposed to be on this list. Like my company, because in my mind, of course, growth meant stability. It meant that you had like this financial security, this blanket, you really knew what you were doing. And then I thought back through our numbers and I did the calculation and I realized, oh no, we did grow a lot. But I didn't have this sense of I guess I felt like if I were at the helm of this really, really successful company, then I would feel a lot of financial security. I would feel really self-assured about how I was running this business, where the business was going. And I didn't feel those things.
Mm-hmm.
And and that was wild to me. But I also then, in hindsight now, I'm able to really take a step back and think, well, at the time, I had no idea what I wanted. I had gotten so far away from that. So how could I measure how I was feeling if I didn't know even what I was hoping to feel? Because it was just such a whirlwind every
Yeah,
single day.
yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting. Last month, I was in 2019, I was in the Tory Burch Foundation Fellows Program, which is a great community for women in business. And we were all invited back that last month. And I reconnected with founders who I had met in 2019, a lot of whom I hadn't spoken to since then. And I have felt a lot of shame over the past 2 years of sort of unraveling my business and pulling it back and getting more comfortable with this idea of like slow and steady profitable growth
Yeah,
versus growth at all costs.
yeah.
And that's just not celebrated. So I have felt a lot of shame around really enjoying that and feeling like I have come alive again. And talking to these other founders, I realized that so many other business owners have gone through a similar arc to what
Mm.
I've gone through, to what it sounds like you just experienced. And a lot of people are going through that because if we started our businesses in the late 20 teens, that was still very much like girl boss era. VC is running the show. Everyone is all about hockey stick growth. And it's easy to get swept up in that. And so in the past couple of months even, it's been really reassuring to know like, okay, it wasn't just me who got swept up in this. It's easy to get swept up in this because it is exciting when you're in it, and being told to dream bigger and do more and expand your vision makes you really think like, okay, I'll do that. But what I have tried to get back to is being very clear and very intentional about what I want personally, professionally, and financially. And now I'm trying, it's hard, but I'm trying to have those three metrics be the thing that really guide me and the business forward.
Personally, professionally, financially.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay. Before we dig more into that, I
Yeah.
want to go all the way back to, and this is interesting because you said you were like 23 when you started your business, right? So did you ever have a full-time, like 9 to 5 job?
Very briefly, yes. So I graduated from college a semester early. And so I did have about a year and a half of full-time work experience, which is like nothing, I know. But I was living in New York. I went to NYU. And so I had a full-time job in New York, and it was at a startup. It was at a venture-backed startup, which was really exciting to be part of. And it was really exciting. And I loved the people I worked with. And I remember and I was making like next to nothing. So I was also babysitting on the side and cobbling together my rent. And I remember at my 1 year review, my boss, who I had a great relationship with, told me, Lillian, everyone on the team really likes working with you. You're doing great. You're doing a great job, but I just feel like you could be putting in more hours. And I remember thinking, like, I'm here like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm 23. I was 22 at the time. I was like, I'm 22 years old. I live in New York City. No, like this is not that serious. And that was when I knew I needed to quit. So, so I quit my job, and I didn't explicitly set out to become an entrepreneur after that. But both of my parents are small business owners, and both of my siblings are small business owners,
Oh,
and a
okay.
lot of people in my extended family are. And so when the opportunity and the idea came up to start Pack Up and Go, it was an easy yes for me. I feel
Gotcha.
very lucky. I never got the pushback from my family that was like, don't you think you
Are
need
you
something
sure? Yeah.
stable?
No, they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, cool. This is yours. Right.
They were like, sounds great.
Yeah.
And I moved back to Pittsburgh at that point where I grew up, moved back in with my parents, and I got a job working at a bar. I was a cocktail waitress for the first 3 years of the business of Pack Up and Go.
Okay.
And yeah.
So this is interesting then because when I started my business, I had my one of the things that I've been talking about is like looking back and realizing what was important to me when I started the business that I lost sight of. But my what I wanted was based very much on what my career had been up to that point. And then I've shared this, I think, on the podcast before, but maybe not in a while. My dad is definitely like a serial entrepreneur by nature, but
Okay.
not a successful one. My mom, because she was married to my dad, is very averse to really any risk, but especially the risk that comes with entrepreneurship. And so, most definitely not a small business owner. So I was very much raised with this very strong impression and understanding that entrepreneurship is risky and frankly irresponsible. And there was a lot of, I'm just going to try this. I'm just going to see what works. I'll just try it for a while. I just need a break from like the 9 to 5 life. And a lot of that's really where my mindset was, which is very, very different from like kind of the perspective you had going into starting yours. But I'm curious because we all have our own individual stories. And so the person listening to this has their own version too, right? But I do feel like it kind of goes one of two ways. It's like either you were kind of born into this, like raised with this kind of mindset, and for the most part, you never really had a standard career, or you had a standard career, got laid off, it was horrible. And so you started something on the back end of that. So most people fall into one of those two categories, and we represent both. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, like thinking back to when you came up with the idea and you decided this was going to be the next chapter, what was important to you then? Like what were you hoping for? What were you dreaming of? What did success look like in your mind when you were just starting out?
Wow. I love that question. And it's kind of a fun one to think back on because I remember just being so excited and just having so much adrenaline that I don't know that I was thinking about it that deeply. But I remember, actually, I do remember because I wanted something exciting. I wanted something where, like, I've always been a really hard worker. I'm sort of a workaholic, and I don't mind working, but I wanted something that I was excited about that I knew would help me build an interesting, dynamic life that I would feel excited and proud of. And one interesting thing that I do remember what I really wanted at the time, I wanted to start a travel company because I love to travel and I wanted to travel constantly. And there's a number of reasons why that dream did not come to fruition in 2016, right? Like I didn't have any money, point blank. I had zero money. There was no way for me to be able to afford to travel. Number two, I was working so much because for the first year and a half of the business, I was on call 24/7. I was our 24/7 in-house traveler support. I was also working at this bar to pay my bills. So it wouldn't have happened then. But then, even logistically beyond that, like Starlink didn't exist yet. There was no easy way for me to work from the road in the way that there is now. And a very fun fact is that this past summer, my husband and I bought a camper van and we did van life for about 4.5 months. And I did finally get to travel the country while working. And that felt like a really sweet full circle moment to happen at about 10 years in. And now I have systems in place and I have a team and Starlink exists. And so it did feel pretty awesome to be able to achieve that goal finally.
Yeah, that's so cool. And it's funny that like you went through this whole upheaval of like, this isn't going to work. And now we have to kind of get realigned again. And you did go back to what the kind of more or less original vision was of what it was you hoped to achieve. That's kind of what I feel like I'm going through myself. And you mentioned this is maybe a very common occurrence. If you're in business long enough, it's going to come around to this. But I feel like that's what I called it on last week's episode. And this is where I kind of feel like my brain is that it's getting realigned with like who I am, who I want to be, what's important to me. And when I think about, I've said this, but when I think about when I started my business, there's no way, like I wasn't thinking about selling it. That wasn't, and in fact, because I wasn't thinking about selling it, the monetary amount you mentioned, the different types of goals that you are kind of assessing for yourself financially, like that number was so much smaller of what I was envisioning. Now, some of that is I truly didn't know what was possible. And so I think like really I went into it so with the mindset of, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, like, let's just try this and see what happens. Like, can I make this work for a while? Could I make enough money to live on? So I truly didn't know. It was a question. And I've thought about this whole what would you go back and tell yourself when you were first starting out question that some people like to ask. And like, I would tell myself, yes, it's going to work. Like, yeah, it's going to work because I wonder what that level of confidence and assurance could have done for how I showed up at that time. It doesn't matter because I got there anyway, but like, yeah, that's really where my mindset was. So now as I've been exposed to more and more quote unquote success and other people's vision, other people's goals. And this is why I said I immediately was like, gosh, you're a really, really impressive person. And then I was like, oh, I bet you've heard that forever. But also, when people have said that to me, and really they've said it my whole life, like since I was a child, I suspect you're the same. And the person listening, probably true for you as well. When I was a kid, the adults in my life, the teachers, the mentors, the role models, the upperclassmen, whatever, would always be like, she is special. And my guest last week actually used the word Lauren said exceptional. She's exceptional. Like, yeah, can't wait to see what you're gonna do. Now, part of that also then ended up including, especially in my entrepreneurship journey, other people casting their own vision for what Podfox could be, what I could accomplish in business. And that's really enticing. When somebody first floated the concept of like the number in question was a $40 million business. When somebody first floated that number to me, a $40 million business doing $40 million in revenue, I literally was like, I don't know what a $40 million business looks like. Like I literally can't, I can't even fathom. It's not a do I want that or not. I literally don't even know what it is. Like, help me see it. And the more people you hang out with and the more time you spend in those spaces where people are casting those kind of visions, it's really enticing. Like, it's like, I said this in a recent conversation. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or not, but like, I was looking at what even the episodes that I shared in the past year about, like, oh, here's what we're doing to scale Podfox. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I'm building, like, which is completely different now. Well, not
Mhm.
completely different, but like, it's not what I thought it was going to be. I was envisioning like this money's already spent, right? Like the money that we're projecting, the money that I'm thinking, I already know how I want to spend it. I've got a plan. Like I know where it's going. And it's crazy that like how fast that train like goes off the tracks. Like I don't know what's happening. I can't steer anymore. We're just in the wilderness. Like what is happening?
Well, and I think that what you brought up is so interesting because I want to be really clear. If you were introduced to this idea of your business looking like a $40 million business, maybe for some people that would unlock something where
Totally.
they realize, oh my gosh, I think that is what I truly want. And I feel like I've been holding myself back just because I didn't know that was possible. And if you are honest with yourself and really do some internal work to make sure that that feels aligned with your vision and values, hell yeah, go for it. Like that is a great vision to have. And so is the vision of running a smaller, profitable, sustainable business, right?
Yep.
It's not like one's right, one's wrong. It's only, is it right for you?
Yeah.
And is it right for how you are feeling when you really, really get to the core of who you are and what you want? And I do think that to an extent, your vision and values and goals are allowed to change and ebb and flow because our lives are like, I am 8 months pregnant with my first kid. And so financial success and like my personal salary has never really been a top priority for me. And now it's starting to be because it turns out I think raising a kid's going to be pretty expensive. So in that way, that has even shifted my goals
Yeah.
around how can I grow the business enough to again allow me to hit my personal financial goal.
Totally.
Like I do want a little bit of lifestyle inflation compared to when I was 25. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah.
but you're right. Like there's a phrase that I'm going to butcher. I wish I could remember this more eloquently, but it's something to the effect of you end up becoming like the product of the five people who you
Mhm.
spend the most time with.
Mhm.
And so if you are surrounding yourself with people who are on this high growth trajectory and are really excited and talking about that all the time, then that does rub off on you and that does feel exciting when that's all that you're around. And if that is your network, your close network, and you realize like, oh, this doesn't feel exactly right for me, then I think it's important to take a step back and say, okay, what is it about their energy or their goals or their ambition that I do really like that does feel aligned with me? That maybe I can apply to, for me, like for my smaller, still profitable, still growing, but at a healthy rate business. And I think that is the level of introspection that can be really hard to do when you're in it and just getting swept up in it and seeing everyone else's accolades.
Yeah, it's that's so real. I think all of that I agree. Check, check, check. I think yeah, certainly my vision is bigger than it was when I started my business, and that's a good thing. And I hope that it continues to grow. And I would like it to grow sustainably. And that's sustainable for my nervous system, sustainable for my lifestyle, sustainable for what's important. I said, and I've said this several times on the podcast, but like when I worked a 9 to 5, I did work I didn't care about with people I didn't like. And then when I came home, I had nothing left to give the people who mattered the most and the things that were the most important. And
Yeah.
when I started my business, that's what was important to me is like, I know I have to work. We live in a capitalist society, and I was not born into a financial situation that could sustain me. So, like, I know that I have to work to live. That said, I want my life to be about the things that matter to me And
Mhm.
I do feel like I let my goals, as they got bigger and bigger and bigger, they got supersized, right? I let those goals overshadow what originally had been important. Now, I want to like say with an asterisk, as I love to say, with an asterisk, because the reason I had those goals was still for my family. It was to provide a certain level of financial security. It was just sort of like, hey, this is a fast track. I could like skip the line and
Yeah.
just get like a quick answer. And yeah, it's going to be really painful between now and then. But once I have that, then I can live the life that I want to live.
Right.
And it's sort of now kind of reassessing like, what if I could just live the life I want to live now?
Yeah.
And it doesn't ever require it being painful. Like actually I mean, not to say life isn't painful. There's lots of pain in the world and
Yeah.
in this country and whatever, like lots and lots of pain. That said, the business doesn't have to be painful. Like it just doesn't
Yeah.
have to be.
Yes, I completely agree. And I remember having a conversation with my director of operations around this time last year because she has been at the company for 9 years. She's been there for almost all of it. So she saw the early, very low tech days and then saw this ascent and then the descent also. And she's been with me through all of it. And she's truly my right-hand woman at the company. And we were reflecting last year because last year was the first year where we really we had to do this very painful couple rounds of layoffs, completely strip back the company, completely rebuild it. And last year was the first year in a couple of years where we were very profitable again. And what we noticed was that it felt easy for the first time in 4 years. And it was really only when we could look back in hindsight that we realized how hard everything felt every day. And
Yeah.
it felt like we were constantly like squeezing more out and always climbing uphill. And once we made these changes to be more in line with our vision and values, it suddenly felt like we were in this flow state. And that's not to say that there weren't little fires we still had to put out and challenges to work through, but everything just felt lighter all of a sudden. And it's been like an amazing change to watch. And I think that the business really responded positively to that as well.
That's fantastic to hear. I think that's really beautiful. And yeah, I think this is where maybe the origins of this whole cozy business concept came from, but like the idea that it could feel easy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole reason, honestly. Like that's what I loved about entrepreneurship to begin with. Not that the beginning is easy, but honestly, neither is having a 9 to 5. I mean, the story that you shared about working for a startup and they were like, you could be working more hours. Like, we all like working with you, but you could be doing more. And you were like, no, I feel like working a 9 to 5 is freaking hard. And people who say entrepreneurship is so hard, they're not wrong. But I also
Right.
think if you think entrepreneurship is harder than having a 9 to 5, you haven't had a 9 to 5 in a while, like, and maybe ever. Having a 9 to 5 is so freaking hard. It's so depleting and it's so demoralizing. And yeah, like I said, it's doing work you don't like with people you don't, or let me rephrase, work you don't care about with people you don't like for somebody else's vision, for somebody else's legacy, for somebody else's net worth. And there's no loyalty to you at the end of the day if you've served your purpose, like they get to cut ties.
Yes, and I do think that there is a difference between entrepreneurs and everyone else in the world who has a good business idea.
Mm.
I do think that there is something about entrepreneurs where you are just like, hell yeah, let's do it. I'm diving in. And not everybody has that. And it could be a result of your upbringing and the voices that you heard around taking risks. And maybe there is a lot on the line for your family in terms of healthcare or making sure that you have a stable income. Those factors aside, I do still think there is something different about people who are entrepreneurs and everyone else. And if you are not, like you do work really hard as an entrepreneur. And if you don't feel that excited about it, don't do it. That will feel like a huge uphill battle forever because you have to be excited about it in perpetuity. And yes, there may be days and weeks where you're like, okay, I'm going through a rough patch. I had that for like a 2-year period, but I was still excited about it
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's true. I don't want to come for people who don't pursue entrepreneurship because I think there's nothing wrong with not choosing it. But
Right.
when you are in it, I think that where I'm trying to go with that is like, as somebody who wanted to do this and still wants to do this, when I first started, I felt like I literally was walking around saying things like, I unlocked the secret to capitalism. Like, who knew? Like, this is the way to do it. Like, man, and I still have those. I'm trying to really focus on this year, and all of the excavation is on a random Thursday morning when Eric and I go to get brunch and run some errands together. And then we come back and dig into a couple hours of work. When we're
Yeah.
driving around or when we're sitting at brunch, we look at each other and we go, this is our life. Like, what a beautiful life we've chosen for ourselves and built for ourselves. And like, he works in the business full time with me, right? And so I like we pinch ourselves of like, just made this up from the corner of my bedroom in my pajamas. And like, look at this life we live. And that is honestly enough. Yes, there's more that I want to do. There's more that I could be more comfortable. I could be more adventurous. I could have more experiences with more resources. I don't want to be one health crisis away from a financial emergency. I want my kids to have a level of financial security, opportunity, options. I want housing security. I want, right. Like there's so many things that like could continue to get better. And as you mentioned, like moving into expanding your family and like a new chapter at home really brings up these questions of like, what do you want this chapter to look like? Like what's important at home? I think that's so valid to continue to reassess. And it's okay to want more, to shift what you want. At the same time, my God, I'm so happy. And like,
Yeah.
can I just get to be happy?
Yeah, you
Like,
can.
can
That's
we
the
just
best
be
part.
happy?
And some things that you just mentioned, I think really go back to those 3 questions that I mentioned earlier around what are your personal goals, what are your professional goals, and what are your financial goals? And when you think about your personal goals, some things that you just mentioned, like the ability to get brunch on a Thursday
Yep.
morning and run errands and then like have that day-to-day schedule flexibility, that's huge.
Yep.
And I genuinely believe that, especially in the world of entrepreneurship, you can have whatever you want in life. You can build a business to support whatever your goals are. But if you don't know what your goals are, then you can't build a business to support them. And so if you had a different work structure or a different meeting structure or a different team structure, maybe it wouldn't allow for you to be able to take those Thursday mornings to go have a nice couple of hours with your partner. Like that's a really amazing thing to be able to do, but you have to structure your business that way. So for the first 2 years of my company, when I was on call 24/7 and working at a bar, my company was not structured for that. I would not have been able to physically do that. And so that's where I think getting into those goals really, really comes in handy because you can build whatever you want, but you have to know what you want in order to build it to support that.
Yeah, I love that. I thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I think that this has been so fun and I feel like we could just keep talking for hours. But I just want to reiterate like all of our information, mine and Lillian's information, are in the description of the episode, including links to connect with us. And if something from this story resonates with you, if you're feeling it, or if you've been through it, you are so enthusiastically invited into our inboxes, DMs, etc., to talk about it. We honestly want to continue this conversation with you. So please make sure you check out the description of the episode to connect with us. Lillian, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I love chatting with you.
Me too. And to you listening, thank you for being here. And we'll see you right here next week.